you for coming. I'll just quickly do the land acknowledgement. So the Tech Hub acknowledges that we are located on the traditional lands referred to as the Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So thank you. The reason why I wanted to do this is there's a lot of fun and exciting things happening, not just in Estevan, but all three of us were up in Saskatoon on Thursday and a bit of Friday for the UP conference. UP stands for Unite the Prairies. And essentially it was a innovation technology showcase so that the people who are, whether they're at seed, pre-seed, so whether they're starting a brand new company or just looking for some investment to break the next glass ceiling, they were all there. And as you guys know, that Ike in 2006 was one of 3 people who founded a software company. Back in 2006, the excitement, the energy that was in technology was just amazing. We had just the smartphone had come out, cloud-based software had just come out. SaaS hadn't even software as a service, wasn't even a revenue stream. It was super fun and exciting. Now, if you go to those same places right now, if you go back to Vancouver or Sydney, Australia, or Silicon Valley and stuff like that, that excitement is not there anymore. It's to the point where if you have a new idea to get funding, they already want to see a revenue stream, which is totally backwards. But in Saskatchewan, what I really noticed in Saskatoon is we're back to that fun, exciting energy, and it's backed up with private venture capital, which we'll talk about this, that is flowing now into Saskatchewan. So with everything that's happening in Estevan, you might have seen Rod and Predator Jones in the newspaper this morning talking about what they're doing with their drones for methane. They have a laser spectrometer that can find out where methane leaks are. He was going to make it today, but he has a big sales presentation that just popped up. So he's doing quite well. We have Marshall. We'll let Marshall tell you about his crazy idea, which is wonderful. It will blow your mind. We have Legacy Water doing some amazing things, which I'm not allowed to talk about, but I can't wait to. Super cool thing. So as we build and create these new ideas, these people need to get funding. And a lot of people will reach out to government funding, but everyone's reaching out to government funding, and it's really restrictive. So now we have an opportunity with TNT, which, believe it or not, is a not-for-profit venture capital angel investment group, which is like, what is that? Because it's not usually the way. And they're backed. Why I like working with them is they're essentially backed and vetted by Innovation Sask, which is the government, and Prairie Canada. So they're a really good group. So with that, I introduce Hassan first, and then Chris, you're going to jump in?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Yeah, go ahead and grab something to eat or drink. I don't mind. It's just gonna be informal. It's gonna be open. It's gonna be a dynamic venue. So feel free to move around, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. I'm just gonna reach over this way, Chris, because I gotta move the slide. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Gord. It was great meeting all of you. And yeah, come on up, move up. So as Gord said, we're a startup TNT, and I'll get into explanation of what that is. Really quickly, yes, we are an angel venture capital group, and we're nonprofit, which seems like a bit of an oxymoron, but I'll explain what that means as we move along. A little bit of background myself. Immigrated to this country when I was really young, like 3 years old, from India. Moved to Winnipeg and then Brandon, and then finally ended up in Regina. I grew up in Regina, so pretty much grew up in the prairies right to high school. So I would consider myself a prairie boy. And ever since, while growing up, innovation, technology, engineering, all that was something I was totally interested in and felt like it wasn't really here in the prairies at the time when I was growing up. And I felt like I had to go somewhere else. And I did. I went to Carleton University out in Ottawa, took aerospace engineering. Fabulous time, loved it. Ended up joining the Air Force because part of my interest was also aviation. So I ended up joining the Air Force. Went everywhere else but Saskatchewan with the Air Force, except for the time I was in training. Flew for them for about 30 years and have have now retired. I'm now a reserve force pilot with the Air Force and fly to Moose Jaw. But during that whole time, I never lost the interest in technology, innovation, and development. And with the move back to Moose Jaw and living in Regina, came back there because an opportunity to come back to Moose Jaw, to the prairies, and be with family arose, and to come back to the area that I grew up in. And that's what I wanted to do. So my wife and I settled in Regina. She's a dentist. She's got a couple of clinics there. So we love to support the local economy and local business scene in Regina. And we were always looking for ways to combine our interest to promote and develop the community along with the interest, my personal interest in innovation and technology. And that's where I came across Startup TNT and the startup space and the startup community in Regina. Started with our first investment in Regina at a local tech company there, and that led to Startup TNT. And that was back in 2021. So since then, been involved with Startup TNT as an investor and then as ambassador, and now I'm the Regina area lead. What's kept me interested in it this whole time is not just a focus on innovation or technology or the startup companies, but it's the people and the community building and the connections that have come out of it. That's what keeps me going with Startup TNT. That's why we're here to talk about it with you and hopefully pass on some of the experiences we've had with Startup TNT. With that, I'll hand that over to Chris to provide his intro.
Yeah, so my story is a lot less interesting than Hassan's. Born and raised in Kamsack, Saskatchewan. Our family owned and operated the John Deere dealership there for a little over 90 years. We also farmed 36,000 acres of farmland. And how I ran into Startup TNT was through an investment that our family made in a company that qualified for the STSI tax credit. And then I was on the email list for a company out of BC, and it was kind of an intro to angel investing. And that's how I met Jesse, who's the Saskatchewan lead. And the rest is history. He gave me his pitch for Startup TNT, and that was about 18 months ago. And I've been a part of it ever since, and now take a role as an ambassador.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So those are our stories and how we got involved with Startup TNT. I want to give you a little background to the TNT story. So TNT stands for Thursday Night Tradition. And this goes back about 4 years when just two individuals who both had a tech background, that's Zach Storms and Tim Lin, who got together, were looking for ways to rejuvenate the startup community in Edmonton. And they started meeting on Thursdays. And they kept meeting every Thursday. And as they kept meeting every Thursday, the community grew and grew and grew around them, to the point where now the community is almost across the entire prairies. They've built this whole community on the motto of have fun, make friends, and build companies. Seems very simple, seems very not complicated, almost not going to work, but it works. And we'll talk a little bit about why we think it works and experiences that Startup TNT has had over the last 4 years. This slide is just to depict that, starting out very, very simple and humble, just folks meeting to get together and chat about tech, to what we see now in 2023, investments actually going into local startup communities, startup companies. These are some of the values, these are our values, corporate values for Startup TNT. Fun, welcoming, empowering. It's open to everybody. Anybody can join, even if someone doesn't want to invest or doesn't even want to be part of the startup scene or doesn't even have a tech background. We open the door to everybody. Anyone can join. It's not even a club. You can just show up. That's really all you have to do. Entrepreneurial, because obviously it's business oriented. The last one is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, you want to be cool. You got to be exciting, so we got to be epic. So that's one of our values. And what's that meant? What's that resulted in over the last 4 years? Well, this is some of the metrics that we have, and these are the companies that all the investors have invested in that have contributed And these are all prairie-based companies. I'll get into more SaaS-related metrics and companies later, but over the last 4 years, 10 million has been raised over 20 discrete investment summits, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. 70 plus companies, so there aren't 70 logos here on this logo wall. They wouldn't fit, but over 70 plus companies have been invested in, and we've so far have engaged 250 investors over the last 4 years to help grow companies in local communities around the 3 prairie provinces. So how did we do that? How did it get to this point? Well, this is probably something you already know, coming from a town like Estevan or Weyburn. It's about the community. It's about building connections and the values that come from building community. And what we've observed the last 4 years, I guess we can break it down to 6 tenets. I mean, this is all stuff that I'm sure all of you know, but just relating our experiences to you guys. Communities are complex. I mean, they're made up of individuals, and relationships between individuals are always going to be complex. And the complexity is a little bit harder these days than it was before. You know, the rate of change of information and the connections between everybody is becoming more and more complex due to things like social media and other ways to interact. So it's no longer non-linear. It's no longer linear. It's very non-linear pathways to get positive outcomes. So that's one of the things that we realized. Therefore, it can't really be controlled, which is actually a good thing, because you don't want a community to be controlled or dictated by any one particular group. You want it to be open, and that's what leads to the most amount of growth, because that's what any community in the long run is seeking. If you want to adapt, if you want to grow, you can't really have any one entity in full control of it. But it has to be comprised of the right ingredients. You need individuals, activators, nurturers, promoters, bridge builders in the community. Like anything else that you want to grow, you got to bring in the right ingredients and shake it up and see what happens. And that's the interactions. You got to have the right interactions with the right people at the right time in order for a community to really grow. And that's what we've noticed in Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatoon, Regina, Winnipeg, all the places where TNT operates. It's creating that environment where you can get the right ingredients, shake it up, make those connections happen, and then things start to grow and expand. And what's it all for? Well, it's obviously for the community, right? The people within the community are serving that community, and that's the whole purpose of bringing people together. Hence the Thursday night traditions that we do every Thursday. And to make that all happen, we need leaders in the community, leaders such as Chris, and obviously individuals in this room, leaders in the tech space with great ideas, people in key positions within municipalities and the province to bring the right backing and support required to make sure the community doesn't just stop growing. And of course, you got to think long term. If you want anything to grow, you got to give it the time it needs in order to actually flourish. And so it can't be a short-sighted view. Again, I haven't covered anything that I'm sure that you guys don't already know. I'm just saying these are the things that have been reinforced with the experience that TNT has gone through over the last 4 years. So if I were to basically sum all that up, I would say it's about the relationships. If you want to solidify what's happening in the community, if you want any community to prosper, grow, and develop, you got to nurture those relationships. And that's what we do. We bring investors, business leaders, key individuals in the community, and not just the investors, because it requires community supporters, regulators, the provincial level, municipal level, to come together. And we take individuals like that, give them opportunities for leadership, and let them grow. It allows us to cultivate their knowledge, bring their knowledge together, and those are the people that we try to bring together, both at events like UP, which was a massive showcase of the individual I'm referring to, or even a smaller informal case like the happy hours that we do every Thursday. And it's not just the individuals, but the organizations involved. So this is a list of sponsor board, I guess you'd call it, a community and summit partners board of all the organizations that have looked at what Startup TNT does and have said, yep, we're willing to put our brand or our label or also our support behind what you do. Some of them are actually provide money. Some of them is just in kind. They just, they promote us on social media and what we do, and they make referrals for us, and vice versa. And others actually throwing money. So that's what I wanted to head on the point about the being nonprofit. So TNT itself doesn't make money. It's a nonprofit organization, and that's why it's able to get funding from the government, because it is a community development program. But obviously, I'll get into this a little bit later. But yeah, it does involve investors who are community-minded. Yes, making a return on investment is what an investor wants, but development of the community is a return on investment. With the community growing stronger and better, we know that our investments in the community will also flourish and grow. So as Gord mentioned earlier, within Saskatchewan, and this is across the prairie, so there's Alberta and Manitoba partners here too, but Innovation Sask and Prairies Economic Development Canada, key ones in Saskatchewan that promote us to help us out. As I mentioned before, RBCX, it's a big supporter of sort of TNT, and they almost always come out to our events. A couple other Saskatchewan ones I want to mention: Cultivator and Collabs. I don't know if you're familiar with those organizations. Cultivator is based out, just for those that don't, Cultivator is basically an incubator based out of Regina. Great supporter. If you ever get a chance to attend their events, highly recommend it. Collabs, they're essentially the same thing, incubator out of Saskatoon. They are the ones that put together the UP conference. And again, great community. If you have a chance to visit them, I would highly recommend it. And then, excuse me, McCurcher, seen as, I give them a bit of a shout out because they're always a big supporter of Startup TNT. They're like the startup law firm.
Yeah.
Was that what you say, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joe Gill and Annie, I forgot her name, Annie Q. They provide excellent support for anyone who is starting up a company, especially a tech startup. I can't say enough good things about them. And of course, we have other supporters, MMP, I'm sure you heard of, SAS Startup Institute, Shrita, lots of great names on here. And sorry, and that one thing I do want to mention, as a nonprofit organization, we have to report back our metrics to all these organizations to make sure that we are doing what they want us to do in terms of community development. So back to the effects slide. So all that put together results in what I started with, which is the impact to these companies here. And the metrics that I showed were originally for all the 3 provinces. Within Saskatchewan, though, you can look at the metrics here in terms of how much support within the province we've gotten. Now, the reason it is, well, first of all, Alberta's a lot bigger and further ahead of us in terms of population demographics and support for tech community. But also, Saskatchewan, Startup TNT has only been operating in Saskatchewan for the last 2 years. So we're a little bit behind, but we're catching up. But in looking at these metrics a little bit more detail for Saskatchewan itself, and this is a slide that I thought would be the most interesting for all of you here. The number of investors that have invested in Saskatchewan companies in total is 133 at about 2.3 million. Of the 133, only 58 are actually from Saskatchewan. There's been more out of province investors in Saskatchewan companies than there have actually been in Saskatchewan. But the investors from Saskatchewan have invested, twice the number. So to me, that shows other people from outside the province see value in the province. They clearly see Saskatchewan. I've heard this from a lot of other folks as well. And Gordon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure you heard the same thing when you're up and Chris as well. Other folks from our province, I'm talking like from BC, Ontario, they see Saskatchewan as like the place to start looking for investments in tech companies.
It's the untapped.
Yeah, it's untapped. And other people are recognizing it. They just haven't put as many dollars behind it. But they're getting there. So that's the community. That's the effect. That's the effect on the community. That's what TNT is been striving to do over the last 4 years and will continue to do. Now that kind of shows the soft, fuzzy part of it, but in terms of how the summits actually kind of work, it is this is a timeline of a typical summit. This is one that's going on right now. It's our Summit 7, we call our Spring Summit, and it runs about 2.5 months. So we kicked it off in April. We made a call out to tech companies or startups, founders, anyone who's interested, said, hey, we're taking applications. Send us your pitch decks, send us your ideas, and we'll start looking at them. And we usually get about anywhere from 25 to 35 companies usually apply. We vet through them, and then we feed them into our funnel and kick it off with the investors. We usually vet the companies down to just the 20. So we start the summit by looking at 20 companies. Then we move through the process. We select and score the 20 companies. Then we score the top 10 of those companies, and then we score the top 5 of those companies, eventually moving to the finale, which is coming up in June 15th, where we will pick the winner of the summit. And that's the company that gets the investment, at least a big part of the investment. Throughout that, we run simultaneously an investor education series. I think this is a hidden gem for both investors and founders, or even the general public. I mean, this provides access to some of the top VCs and angel investors in North America, and you get literally one-on-one hour and a half info session with people you would probably never be able to get in the room with, and they will talk to you about things they've gone through, lessons they've learned over some of them 30 years plus of investing across North America. So this is a hidden gem this is the part I really, really enjoy. Chris, would you say that, Chris?
Yeah, no, I would agree 100%. Speaking from my own, personal background, when I joined Startup TNT, I thought I knew about, angel investing because I had done, 3 or 4 deals prior to that, and I learned very quickly. I had a lot to learn, and through the investor education sessions, I've learned a lot. And it's a nonstop process. Where it came from is night and day in 18 months.
Go ahead.
Quick question: Is it beginner friendly? Like if you have a startup that you meet, they walk in, they don't know much about it.
It's exactly for beginners. Yes.
Yeah.
We want beginners. Yeah, the whole idea, because that's how we want to curate the community. We need people to take those chances that don't know. They feel like they don't know what they're doing. This is what we want, because we have access to the resources that will help those beginners get to where they want to be. That's exactly what we're looking for.
And it's the beginners both for the companies
Yes.
and for the investors.
Yeah, this says investor education series. This is actually investor and founder. We run 2 parallel education sessions. Tuesdays is for the investor. Thursdays is for the founders. So it's for both. And then this is a very detailed. I'm not going to talk to this one. It just sort of describes in a lot more detail what I just said, that we have a screening process. It is a competitive process because, as we all know, competition usually brings out the best in everybody, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking to, you improve through competition and by learning through others, through the successes of others. And so this just describes that competitive, from a top 20 to a top 10 and 5 to eventually choosing the winner. And this is just a brief explanation of that process. This just describes the more details of how it's actually done. I won't get into this too much, but really just to say that we group all the investors together. They invest through what we call a special purpose vehicle. They all become limited partners in that vehicle, and that's what gets invested into the company. And also that along with that, TNT runs a VC fund, which also co-invests in each summit. So the winner of the investment summit usually walks away with about $200,000 in their initial investment. Yeah. Yeah, and each investment each investor could be as little as $5,000. And so wrapping it up with where we started. It's all started with two guys meeting in Edmonton because they didn't think the tech community in Edmonton was providing them with enough support and growth and opportunities. To now, 4 years later, it started with happy hours back then, and we're still doing those happy hours now. 211 happy hours, one happy hour every week. It's now in 5 cities across the prairies: Edmonton, Alberta, Saskatoon, Regina, and Winnipeg. We do it every Thursday. Usually starts at 6 p.m. Based on what's happening in the city, and usually it happens in these locations. These change week by week. We post it different. We post on our website locations, and we send out. If you sign up for the newsletter, obviously you'll get all that info. So this is where it started, and this is what we're continuing to do in order to promote that community, bring investors together with founders to provide the best opportunity for communities for the tech community to grow and flourish. So that's basically the message I wanted to provide to you. Hopefully, if there's anything else.
I want to open up to some questions, but for Angud and myself, the reason why we're bringing this to the community is if people within our community invest in the businesses in our community, or if, like I was talking to a gentleman who's working with Angud and others about a really neat process, which I'm not allowed to talk about, but by me saying to him, I can help you with your investment if you need some. Also, Jesse, who runs the show, is also helping me help this person find some Canadian employees to run the company. So the idea is if we start to invest our own money, then we have a say to help keep that business here. Instead of just being another business, when you pull stuff out of the ground, stick it on a train, and someone else gets the job. That kind of thing. But also the other spot is we have people like Marshall, we have people like Legacy Water, and it would be great if they didn't have to go outside of the community to ask for funds. I know that for me personally, when I ran into this stuff, I was like, oh God, VC, here we go, venture capital. It's a Ponzi scheme. But these guys, because they are a not-for-profit vetted by the Innovation South and Prairie Can, I feel that we can trust them. That was just my closing remarks, but please let's ask questions. I can turn off the camera and we can just mingle and ask questions.